And that was when I knew I could either let myself be destroyed by everything that had happened, or I could find a way to use all of that horrible stuff to my advantage. In this video, I'm sharing how mental illness taught me how to be a better version of myself, and how you can use your own challenges to grow. So, let's talk about mental health. Hello and welcome. I'm Jeremy Godwin. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Let's Talk About Mental Health TV, where each week I share simple ideas for better mental health. So this week is a little bit different because I'm sharing some of my own story relating to mental health. I'm also dressed like a college professor, all rugged up for winter, and I've got my coffee. And I thought what I'd do this week is have a little bit of a talk about why I do the work that I do, both here on Let's Talk About Mental Health TV and in the podcast, and also when I'm working one-on-one with clients as a coach and a counselor. The thing is that I didn't just wake up one day and suddenly decide to start doing this stuff. It took me an absolute lifetime to get here, and it happened mainly because of my own struggles with my mental health over the past 10 years and beyond. I'll tell you about them in a second. Just need some coffee. Oh, hallelujah. So I don't want to sit here and list every single thing that I've dealt with because we'd be here for ages, but I've talked in the podcast quite a few times about sort of bits and pieces, and I've discussed how I had a total breakdown in late 2011, which was followed by severe depression and anxiety for about 7 years. The thing is that even though I can trace things back to that sort of one specific day in 2011 when I had that breakdown, something snapped at work and I just couldn't function anymore, the truth is that that didn't just come out of nowhere. It had been building and building for many years up until that point. I had a lot of baggage that I was carrying around in terms of family stuff. Specifically, my father left when I was 7 and I felt rejected. I rarely ever saw him after that. And my mother became physically and emotionally abusive on an almost daily basis. And by the time I hit high school, I was being bullied relentlessly at school. And what it meant was that I didn't feel safe anywhere at all as a teenager. And that sort of trauma can lead you to do things to cope, which may not be the healthiest choices. I mean, I started doing things like ditching school and smoking quite heavily. I also began overeating, and then when I was 17, I started drinking quite a lot, 2 or 3 nights a week. It became worse and worse throughout my 20s, and at the same time, I was trying to build my career while also battling massive imposter syndrome. By my 30s, my drinking was 5 to 6 nights a week, and the idea of moderation was completely out the window. I would spend the entire period from Friday afternoon through to Sunday morning completely drunk, and it usually resulted in me making a fool of myself in some shape or form. So I'd end up spending the next day feeling ashamed and embarrassed and all of these other negative emotions. At the same time, my family life was a mess, and I was dealing with a lot of issues as, my mother's health was all over the place. And as an only child, I felt this weird sort of strong responsibility to try and save her from the poor lifestyle decisions that she was making for herself, even though I had all of this sort of animosity that had been undealt with and all of this stuff. And at the same time that all this was happening, my finances were a mess. I was constantly racking up debt, and I was spending money non-stop to try and fill all of the voids that I was feeling in my life. I was nearly $100,000 in debt. When I say nearly, I mean nearly. It was a couple of thousand off being 100,000. And even though I was earning a 6-figure salary, I was barely keeping my head above water, and I was getting phone calls from collections and all of these different things. I had like 5 credit cards on the go, 3 personal loans. It was just ridiculous. I was miserable. There's no other way to describe it. I was absolutely miserable. Then, while I was dealing with all this, something happened at work. This was 2009, 2010. Where a team leader that reported to me lodged a bullying and harassment claim, and I was eventually cleared of it, But it took more than 6 months, and the entire time that it was going on, the company gave me absolutely zero support. My manager specifically said to me, "Did you do it?" I said no. And he said, "All right, we'll just get on with the job then." And that was the extent of the support that I received. I would go into work every single day, and it was day in, day out, feeling sick to my stomach. I remember sitting at my desk and it felt like my stomach was trying to eat itself from stress, and I wanted to vomit up my soul. Now, I can say hand on heart that I know that I'm tough to work for as a manager because I have very high expectations, but when someone lies repeatedly and falsifies records, I'm going to treat it seriously. I'm not going to just let that go, and I will take formal action. That is exactly what I did, and I would do exactly the same thing today. Eventually, like I said, after about 6 months, I was cleared of all of the allegations, and I just didn't want to work there anymore. It felt tainted. I felt abandoned by the company that I had given almost 10 years of my life to. And so I left. I found another job and I left. However, I was so traumatized by what had happened, and bear in mind, I'm still going through all this other stuff in my personal life as well. But I was just so traumatized that it began to affect me at my new job, and I was having a lot of trouble with both my physical and my mental health. And then in mid-2011, my old company contacted me after almost a year since I'd left and asked me to go over everything all over again that had happened. This time with lawyers, because the team leader was taking legal action against them and they needed my statements. All of this happened as I was getting ready to go on holidays to the USA for a few weeks. And so I was trying to cram all of that in. And in the 2 weeks leading up to my holidays, I found myself having to relive all of that trauma all over again after putting it behind, feeling like I'd put it behind me, although in hindsight, I really hadn't. And by the time I sat down on that plane seat, I was a mess. Somehow I managed to push through, and I made the most of my holidays. I had a few struggles along the way. I had a few black moments where I felt like I couldn't go on, but I managed to hold it together. And then I went back to work, and shortly after I returned to work, I wasn't able to hold it together anymore. Someone came in and asked me a question, and it wasn't even anything major. I remember I shut my office door, I put my head in my hands, and I thought, I just can't do this anymore. And I tried, and I could not physically do anything. So I got my bag, I left early, and I still, nearly 10 years later, do not remember the almost half an hour drive home. But all I know is I was at work, then I was at home, no idea how I got there. I curled up in a ball and I just completely lost it. And the next 2 weeks were some of the hardest of my entire life. I cried constantly. I was terrified constantly. Within just 2 weeks, I was suicidal and I was barely able to function, barely able to drag myself out of bed. When I did, I'd get in the shower and I'd start sobbing. The idea of going to work terrified me. I would be shaking at sitting in the tray of the shower, water raining down on me, absolutely terrified and just racked with fear and sobbing, and couldn't bring myself to leave the house. So the next few years were rough. I had severe depression and anxiety, along with PTSD and an alcohol addiction that went from bad to way worse pretty much overnight. My overeating went into overdrive, and I became so agoraphobic that even just going outside to collect the mail or put the bins out felt terrifying, absolutely terrifying. It took a few years, but eventually the worst of it began to fade. It certainly didn't go, but it faded into something a bit more manageable with lots of medication, the strongest dosages that we could find, and it took multiple goes to find the right meds. And by 2014, I slowly had enough clarity to begin to reflect on everything that had been happening. Suddenly one day it hit me. All of this had led me down a path that I might never have gone down, and suddenly I was faced with countless new opportunities. I could do pretty much whatever I wanted because I had nothing left to lose. And that was when I knew I could either let myself be destroyed by everything that had happened, or I could find a way to use all of that horrible stuff to my advantage. And so that's what I did. I had never been to university because I just wanted to get a job at the end of high school so that I could get out of home and move as far away as quickly as possible, which I did. So I enrolled in a 3-year undergraduate degree studying psychology and sociology. I was really inspired by my psychologist and I thought, I want to do that, not realizing it would take me like 6, 7, 8 years to actually get to a point of being a clinical psychologist. The degree itself took me 4 years instead of the 3 because I was still heavily medicated and I also had to deal with quite a few setbacks in my personal life during the course of my study. But the day that I completed that degree was the absolute proudest of my life because I had achieved something in spite of my depression and my anxiety, and it felt like a new beginning. It took me a couple of years to figure out what to do next, and I even returned to roles in the business world for a bit. But one day, I made a mistake at work in 2019, and I had a sudden realization that I needed to leave, and I needed to follow my heart and do something in the mental health space. So I quit my job, and that night, I started writing the outline for the very first episode of the Let's Talk About Mental Health podcast. And, well, here I am. I do the podcast and there's a YouTube show every week, and I work with clients one-on-one from around the world to help them to find ways to work through their own challenges with mental health and well-being. So here is what mental illness taught me about being the better version of myself that I can possibly be. You can either let shitty things in life define you, or you can own it and use it to create something new. Something better. I haven't been reduced by all of the things that I've experienced. I've become something more, something better, in spite of all of that. And just maybe because of all of that. It's given me a different outlook on life. It's given me a different way of understanding things. It's also made me a lot more considerate about myself and about other people. It's made me understand the necessary focus of doing no harm, being kind, and giving more than you take. You can choose to be the victim of your circumstances, or you can choose to harness them. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And you can use them as fuel to be the very best version of yourself possible every single day. So that's it for this week. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you made it all the way to the end of the video, drop me an upward pointing arrow because life is all about learning how to move forward. Check out this video that you might like about why I stopped trying to be happy and how that made me happier. And for more great content, subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to be advised when new episodes land. And remember to catch the podcast every Sunday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. Thanks for watching, take care, and talk to you next time.